Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the National Foundation of Swallowing Disorders Meet the Makers webinar series. My name is Elizabeth Daly. I'm the Executive Director of the NFOSD. Typically, NFOSD President Ed Steger MCs these events. However, he's feeling under the weather tonight, but plans to join us for our next event. Our goal with the Meet the Makers series is to offer our community access to those who have created products specifically for people with swallowing disorders. This series is not meant to be promotional, but rather informational. We want to give you the opportunity to ask the creators of these products your questions, learn more about how the products help people with dysphagia, and make connections so that your voices feel heard and understood among our industry partners. We thank you for joining us this evening and hope that you find this series to be helpful. Thank you to those of you who made a donation upon your registration. It is only with the financial support of our community that we're able to continue to further our mission. The makers in this series are volunteers, and they have volunteered their time to share this information. They have not paid to participate in the series, nor was it required to be a past or current financial sponsor of the foundation, although many of them are, including tonight's Meet the Makers, True Angle. 1 second here. Right. If you've participated in an NFOSD webinar previously, you are likely familiar with our system. You will be muted throughout the presentation, but are encouraged to ask questions at any point during the presentation using the chat box feature or the question feature. There's 30 minutes reserved on this call for questions, so please don't be shy about asking. We will record this presentation and make it available on our website within the next few days. There are 2 handouts available for you to download on your toolbar, and we'll also include this in an email after the webinar. No ASHA CEUs are provided, but you will receive a certificate of participation following the broadcast. With that, I want to provide a reminder that tonight's broadcast is for informational and educational purposes. Both the NFOSD and tonight's speakers do not intend to serve as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Because this talk highlights a treatment device, we want you to take the time and remind you that you should never modify your treatment program without first consulting with your healthcare team. If you need assistance in identifying a swallowing specialist, please reach out to us. And it's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Gabi Constantinescu, the co-founder and chief experience officer of True Angle. Gabi holds an adjunct assistant professor position in the Communication Sciences and Disorders Department at the University of Alberta, and she's an affiliate of the Institute of Reconstructive Sciences in Medicine. She has over a decade of clinical experience assessing and treating patients with dysphagia. Gabi went on to obtain her PhD, where her research directly influenced the design and development of the Mobili. Gabi received the 2020 Michael Donovan NFOSD Innovation Award for her work on the Mobili, which was presented at the Dysphagia Research Society annual meeting. Also present tonight from True Angle to help answer any of your questions are Business Development Manager Mary Grimes and Speech Pathologist Renzo Garcia. And now I'd like to turn this presentation over to them. So give us just 1 second here and we'll switch screens. All right, and Gabi, you should be able to see pop up. Excellent. Yep, we can see your screen and we can see your camera.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for that lovely introduction. It is a pleasure to be here. This is our 2nd time presenting with the NFOSD. So I'd like to thank Elizabeth and Ed and all of NFOSD for hosting us tonight and for thinking of us. It's such a nice partnership to be able to highlight and partner with industry as well as bring together patients, clinicians, and researchers. So I think NFOSD has done a wonderful job of spearheading that in our field. So without further ado, I will begin this talk. And as Elizabeth mentioned, there will be a half an hour at the end of this talk to allow for addressing any of your questions. As Elizabeth mentioned, joining me today, I have Renzo Garcia, who's also a speech language pathologist and part of our customer success team, and Mary Grimes, who's our business development associate. The plan for tonight is to very briefly in half an hour, introduce you to surface EMG, which is the technology that our product uses. Introduce you to mobility very briefly as well. Cover the 3 types of packages that we offer, the core, the plus, and the premium, and just again very briefly mention the difference between the 3. And then, because this is a more clinical focus webinar, I'd like to cover some important topics about using SEMG in the clinic. So let's get started and have a very brief introduction, a whirlwind introduction to SEMG biofeedback. Now, biofeedback has been used as a term to mean many different things, I find. The definition that I like to use is the one that you see here. This is the definition used by Chen and colleagues from a 2006 article. And to read it off the screen here, it's basically the use of technology to increase awareness of physiological processes that we can't typically see by providing real-time, precise representations of the activity. So the 2 terms that I gravitate towards here in this definition are the term technology, so we use technology, and also the term real time. So it has to be real time feedback that you notice when you're using this type of thing. What you'll notice in this definition as well is that we're saying increase awareness. So we're detecting physiological processes. We are not stimulating. So biofeedback is not muscle stim. Now, there are many types of biofeedback sensors out there, so many types of biofeedback technologies. So to orient us on the map here, these are just a few of the types of sensors that I am aware of. I'm sure there's many more out there. But of course, we have SEMG, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. We have manometry, we have accelerometry, we have what's called mechanomyography, which I understand is quite similar to accelerometry, sometimes the same thing. And we also have technologies out there that combine sensors as well. What we're going to be talking about tonight is biofeedback where surface electromyography or SEMG sensors are used. And the type of technology that we are offering, that we're going to be talking about, is called mobility. There are other ones out there, but tonight we're going to be talking about mobility. So what is SEMG? Well, the little s is quite important. It stands for surface because this type of technology sticks under your chin on the surface of your skin. When you don't see the little s, so you might just see EMG or sometimes needle EMG, which sounds a little scary. We are not talking about surface EMG. We're talking about the type of EMG where a needle actually goes into your muscle. But when you see the S, it means surface. It's basically a sticker. We're detecting what your muscles are doing through the skin. So it's non-invasive. That's what the S stands for. E stands for electro, and it's also a very important letter in the acronym here. It detects the electricity or the muscle excitation that your muscles give off as they contract. M for myo, because we're looking at muscles, and graphy, because all that information is turned into a graph that's then shown to you in visual biofeedback. So hopefully that covers, for those of you new to this technology, what SEMG stands for. Now, in the clinic where Renzo and I used to work, we were very, very fortunate, and we actually had access to this technology. Not many clinics do because it's quite expensive in the form that you see it here. But we were very, very lucky to have a clinic that could afford to purchase this for us. So you see our colleague here, Shannon, she's hooked up to the SEMG technology that we used in the clinic. Now, of course, this big screen here did a lot more than just SEMG. So the top thing here worked on scopes, but there's a computer at the bottom here. But what I'll draw your attention to is this hardware at the bottom. Kind of blanked out on what term to use. Hardware at the bottom here, where the wires that are hooked up to Shannon here go into, so that we can detect the activity of the muscles as she's working and doing the swallowing exercises. On the screen, she can see a line that goes up and down. So when Shannon's not doing anything, she'll see a flat line. And when she swallows or moves her jaw up and down, she will see a deflection in the line going up and down. We used this system to educate patients on how to do certain swallowing exercises, but also to draw attention to the swallow, to elicit more effort, to elicit a prolonged or sustained contraction, and to count the reps in as they were doing them. It was quite effective. The only issue with this is that it's very bulky. It was very tough to move around, even though it had wheels. And for short folks like me, so I reach about the bottom. When I'm standing, I reach about the bottom of the screen here. It's very tough to see around it as we were moving it. All to say that, you know, we did feel it was quite bulky, and at the end of each session, when the patient left and I pulled out my cell phone from my lab coat or my back pocket, we did wonder as clinicians why it was this way, why I had access to you know, essentially a mini computer that fit in the back of my pocket, and my patients had to use this quite archaic looking fridge-sized piece of equipment. I am not a problem solver. I am a problem identifier, I suppose. And so over lunch hour, I found myself complaining about this a fair bit and wondering why this was the way it was. But I happened to be fortunate enough to work next door to biomedical engineers, and they are problem solvers and they are creative thinkers. And one of them decided to play around and essentially troubleshoot and create a solution for us. Fast forward 10 years, which is where we are today, we now have a miniaturized version of what I just showed you, which fits right under the chin. It has no wires, so it connects with your iPhone or iPad via Bluetooth. And it essentially does everything that big machine did for us and more. So what it does is it's sitting here, and I'll demo it to you in a second, is it detects the contraction of your muscles as you're completing the exercises. When you are nice and relaxed, that line is nice and flat. As soon as there is muscle excitation, you'll see a deflection in the signal. So when you swallow, you'll see the line go up. When you relax your muscles, you'll see the line go down. When you swallow with more effort, as your speech language pathologist might instruct you to do, you will see that line reach a higher peak. That information is then displayed to you in an app, and those apps, or in that app, the repetitions will have a target line that's personalized to you, and you will try to reach that target line with your biofeedback signal. When you reach it, you get additional congratulatory biofeedback or feedback tokens here. What the device looks like is something like this. So on the front, you have the on-off button, and on the back, you have 3 little sensors. So again, these are sensors, they're not electrodes, they only detect what your muscles are doing. One of these is the reference sensor. So for those clinicians who are new to this and patients out there, this reference sensor should sit on a bony prominence, so a part of our body that doesn't move. And for us, that'll be the mandible or the jawbone. The two active sensors, those should be in line with the muscle fibers of interest. So for us, I'm talking to the clinicians in the audience now, for us, that'll be the anterior belly of the digastric. For the patients in the audience, it's essentially in line with these little muscles down here. We send with our devices a package of double-sided adhesives. So these are essentially stickers, and that is how the device sits under the chin. There are 3 different types of exercises programmed into the app at the moment. One of them is a regular swallow, so you swallow like you normally would. This acts as a warm-up exercise and it primes the muscles for subsequent more intensive workouts. The second one is the effortful swallow. So some of you might be familiar with this. You've either done it or you've prescribed it. You essentially swallow with effort, as the name implies, and that biofeedback line should go up higher when you're doing this correctly. And the held swallow, which is our way of calling the Mendelssohn maneuver swallowing exercise. We just found the word held was more meaningful for patients. And this essentially involves, as some of you might know, swallowing and then sustaining that contraction for 2 to 3 seconds. So that's why you'll see in this particular screen, the line going up and staying above that line and then going back down. Now, these exercises need to be prescribed to you by a clinician, so you're not just doing them for the sake of doing them. A clinician needs to identify that you would stand to benefit from these exercises. Again, this is a whole system, so Mobili is not just a sensor device. It comes with a little charging dock, the app itself, as well as a clinician portal. And to me, this is where the powerhouse of the whole system lies, because it allows us to understand treatment dose. So how many exercises have actually been completed by patients when they're going home to do this at home or with you in the clinic. And from there, being able to make decisions about whether a workout was effective or not. Very briefly, I'm going to touch on the 3 packages that we currently have. The most basic of them all is the Mobili course. So this one essentially is sending you a sensor device, and then you'll be able to see the biofeedback line going up and down and fluctuating as you contract your muscles. This is the one that I'll demo for you today. The other 2 are Plus and Premium. With these 2 packages, clinicians have access to a clinician portal. So that's the web portal that I just showed you in the previous screen. The difference between Plus and Premium is that with Plus, you can customize workouts when you're working with patients in the clinic, whereas with the Premium, you would be able to do that as well, but also remotely. So you can send patients home to work with these devices at home, and you would be changing, updating, or not doing anything to their workouts and just looking at adherence and progress, pardon me. The clinician portal looks something like this, and I'll show you in a minute another screen that shows you a little bit better. But essentially, you are able to change the workout and also view adherence. So what you're looking at in this bottom part of the screen are progress bars, essentially vertical progress bars, each one representing a separate date. So every time your patient does something at home, there should be a progress bar, a vertical progress bar. When there's adherence all throughout, so they're doing all their work at home, you should see color across the board. When you're seeing lack of color, it means that something wasn't completed that day. So let's talk a little bit about how we can use this in clinic. This is actually a screen recording that unfortunately is not working, but that's okay. I'll just talk around it. So what you're looking at on the top right part of the screen here is where you would be editing the in-clinic workouts. So you'd be clicking on this edit button. You can decide how many rounds you want to assign the patient, and whether or not you want to include regular swallows, effortful swallows, or held swallows. Once you're happy with the workout, you would press launch. A QR code would pop up, you would scan it, the app would open automatically, and you can go ahead and work out. If you want to send your patient home to work out remotely, you would just be using this remote button here to do the same thing effectively, but you would only need to do that once. The patient wouldn't have to scan the QR code every single time they're working out. You would be setting them up once and monitoring their progress from there. What I want to show you real data now. So what that would look like for a patient who is doing everything every single day almost, and what a non-adherent patient looks like. So what you're looking at in the top screen here is a screenshot from one of my research participants. On the x-axis here are the days that they logged in and completed something. And then on the y-axis, you're seeing the number of repetitions or swallows that were completed. The reason everything is in orange is because we're looking at all types of exercises. You can see I can select regular, effortful, or held and just look at those if I wanted to. But essentially, because everything is filled with color, minus these little blips on certain days, I can at a glance see that this patient is really doing everything that I've asked them to do at home. When we're looking at the bottom screen over here, we're seeing a patient who is non-adherent. So this particular patient came in, we set him up with the home program. He completed maybe one round with us in the clinic. It looks like the following day he tried to do something at home and then he'd never logged back in. That's why all the bars are gray rather than colorful. Because this is a research participant, I can't intervene and see what's going on. But if this was a clinical situation, I would probably call in 2 or 3 days and check in and see what's going on. Maybe we need to revisit the exercises, talk about why these exercises are important, and figure out adherence-wise if there's something that we can do together. Again, based on some of the questions that we receive, the more clinical questions, what I wanted to cover today is a little bit about what SEMG is and what it isn't. So I'll start with what it isn't. It's not a magical solution. You still have to do the exercise if you're a patient out there in the audience, so you still have to work out. That's how you get those muscles stronger and better coordinated. It's not a hands-off solution, so for the clinicians in the audience, you still have to conduct an assessment, you still have to understand the pathophysiology of the swallow and why you're recommending certain exercises and what type of workout and intensity you're recommending. It is not a swallow assessment tool, so again, SEMG provides you information about muscle excitation and only about the muscles that are in the submental area. So remember, this is a whole system. There's 30 muscle pairs and 6 cranial nerves, that whole phrase that gets cited a lot. So we have to remember that this is the whole system we're looking at. It is not a measure of force, of pressure, or function. So because of the type of sensor that we're working with, again, we're looking at muscle excitation. So the electricity, if you will, that muscles are giving off as they're contracting. We're not looking at the more downstream effect of that, which is the pressure or the force that muscles exert as they're contracting. And we're not looking at function. So we're not looking at, can the patient swallow because I saw the line go up and down. And definitely, this is not muscle stimulation. So this question we do still get quite a bit. The SEMG sensors are only detecting what the muscles are doing. What SEMG is, however, is a non-invasive technology. So really, it just feels like a sticker on your skin, nothing more. It's extremely easy to use. It's, again, non-invasive. You don't require extensive training to use it. It's very engaging. So right away, you'll see as you move your muscles and as you swallow with more effort, you'll see a deflection. You can try to beat your best score essentially and really get into it above and beyond what the gold standard is in our field right now, which is to send patients home with a printout of exercises. It is a home-friendly system. So for me, and I'm sure for a lot of clinicians out there, it is extremely important that we provide access to care that is care when patients need it, as soon as they need it, and to the same level that we can offer it in the clinic, and a means to objectively track work. So for the, I guess, the researchers in all of us, it's nice to see finally the treatment dose that is actually quote unquote taken. So what are patients actually doing so that we can actually understand why or why not a certain workout works or doesn't. So that concludes the, I guess, more PowerPoint-y part of my presentation. What I want to do next is I'm going to stop showing my screen here, and I'm going to just place the mobility device under my chin. I'm going to next exit this and just mirror my phone to the screen here briefly. So you should all see my phone. And this is the mobility app. And what I'm going to do is just show you the mobility core part of it. I'm not going to go into anything else. So you should see a little line at the bottom here, and you'll see it deflect as I'm talking. And the reason for that is because I'm opening and closing my jaw. So obviously there's muscle excitation as I'm doing that. I'm going to do a dry or saliva swallow. There it is. Now I'm going to do an effortful swallow. There it is. So I'm going to stop here. So this is how clinicians out there, you can teach an effortful swallow. You can elicit more effort. You can have a discussion about what more effort should look like with biofeedback, and then potentially even try to beat this in the next set of repetitions. So I'm going to press start again. That was another effortful swallow, but a little weaker. I'm going to try a Mendelssohn maneuver swallow next. So you can see I have swallowed, and now I'm holding that swallow, hold, and relax. I'm going to try a couple more things here. I'm going to do 3 or 4 tongue presses to the alveolar ridge. So what I've done here is I'm not swallowing. All I'm doing is pushing up with the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. I'm going to try a Masako. So that's putting the tongue between the teeth gently and swallowing. So just very briefly showing you how you can use the core part of this app to educate on different types of exercises out there. But when you want and are ready to do an actual full workout, I recommend using this part of the app. because it does calibrate to where your patient is at and sets personalized targets for that. So I'm going to quit this and turn it over to questions.
Gabi, thank you so much for that presentation, for the demonstration. I think that's so helpful to see it in real time, what that looks like. We have a lot of good questions that have come in, so I will go ahead and get started here. The first one came in from somebody that's going through swallow therapy right now, and the type of therapy that they're receiving is called vital stim, and they're using electrodes to stimulate the swallow muscles when they do swallowing exercises. The question is that similar to SEMG? Is that a type of SEMG, or is that something different?
That's a great question, and sometimes we get that question from clinicians as well. So vital stim includes muscle stimulation, so that is a little bit different because it does something to your muscles. I have personally never used vital stim, but I've seen it, and sometimes technologies like that will also include biofeedback so that you can see the biofeedback as the muscle is being stimulated. So in short, to answer your question, it is a little bit different, yes. And you do have to do that with a clinician. You can't do that on your own at home.
Excellent, thank you. A question about the mobility device and the sensor. Can you use the device with more than one patient?
Yes, you can. So what I do with my research patients, for instance, is I have 2 or 3 of these on hand. When I send one home with the patient, they have it for about 6 weeks. I get it back. I clean it with an alcohol pad or cavi wipes, and then I set it aside for when another patient comes in. When you would be using this in clinic, I personally don't use this in clinic, but we do have lots of clinicians out there who do. You would do the same thing. So between patients, you would just clean the sensor device with alcohol pad or cavi wipe or whatever you use in the clinic. The adhesives, however, are single use, even for me. So once you take it off, it just turns into a little gunky mess, so you can't reuse that. Yeah. Anything else, Renzo, Mary, that you want to add for either question that was just asked? Or... Okay.
I don't think so, not yet.
Okay, great.
We have a question here. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about adherence profiles. And the question says, for example, are the pro users more adherent than the base model patients? And what is that looking like?
So feel free to clarify if I've misunderstood your question. When you're saying base model, you mean the core?
Yes.
The line going up and down. Okay. So with that one, the base or the core model, you don't have access to adherence metrics. All you'd be able to do is sit next to the patient and do what I just showed you with this last little demo. With the clinician portal that comes with the Plus and Premium, you would be able to see that. I have seen everything from, like I've shown you the worst case scenario that I've seen, the 0% adherence or near 0% to 100% adherence from patients. I do sense that their adherence is a little bit higher when they're using the biofeedback. The research study that I'm currently running is looking at pen and paper adherence versus biofeedback adherence. And so what patients are doing is they're going home either with a pen and paper diary or with the Mobili, whichever one they started with, they come back and then I switch them over, and everyone does everything essentially. What I'm noticing is that when there is biofeedback involved, either because patients know that we can see it or because they're engaged, it's hard to really know at this point. But we do see higher levels of engagement and reported more engagement with being able to see what you're doing and having that reminder to work with the app.
And a follow-up on that, with the clinical portal, is there anything that the patient or the clinician needs to do to send that adherence data?
No, so all clinicians do once they have access to the Plus or the Premium, whichever one you're looking at, is get a login from us. You'd log in and that's it. So I can, if there's time at the end, I can show you my demo clinician portal. It's just a simple login. You can log in from anywhere. We don't allow you to enter any patient data in there. So essentially, even if you pulled it up on your app, on your phone, anywhere, it would be fine. We're just allowing you to enter an acronym. So for instance, instead of Gabi Constantinescu, you would enter GC1 or something like that. You would customize a workout for me. You would have me scan it with my own phone so that I'm scanning the QR code of the workout. Beyond our sessions, I would take this little device home, work with it at home, and all you as the clinician need to do is log in whenever is convenient to you and see what I'm doing at home. For my research participants, I try to log in at least once a week and just have a quick look and see where they're at.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. This is a question from a clinician. Do you recommend that clinicians take an SEMG course before purchasing the device, or is there enough information that comes with the device that they could learn if they've never had experience using something like this before?
That's a great question. We offer everything in-house. So once you sign up with us, and you know what, even before, I'd be happy to do, I feel so passionately about this biofeedback and the powers that it has to offer for our field. I'd be happy to offer a we call it Biofeedback Basics webinar. It's free. We typically offer this to our customers, but if you're interested, I'm happy to link up with you after the talk and we can set something up like a lunch and learn or something like that.
Excellent, thank you. The next question here I have is the visual feedback difficult for people with low vision, and are there options to change the color or the background to help with the contrast?
It's a great question. Right now there aren't, but if that is something that is important to you or your patients, if you're a clinician asking this, just let us know. We're always taking feedback in. And based on, this is the nice thing about partnerships and linking up with patients and clinicians, the number of requests that come in for a particular feature is what drives change. So please let us know if that's something that's important.
Excellent, thank you. Let me I'm going to catch up here. We have so many questions that came in, which is fantastic.
And I'll stop talking so much.
This is great. Are there studies that are looking at results using Mobili and comparing that to other SEMG options? And are there other SEMG options out there?
There are other SEMG options out there for sure. Each one does something slightly different or different things. I like to think of ours as a very clinician, patient-friendly type of technology. So it's meant for the everyday clinician out there. If you are looking for more of a research type SEMG tool that gives you, I don't know, median frequencies and 15 percentile frequency and those types of data, and you have more access to the filtering and bits and knobs, then there are other technologies out there for SEMG, for research with SEMG. With respect to Mobili being compared to another type of technology that is also SEMG, not that I'm aware of, but here's the thing, we are always looking to help out or partner with people who want to do arm's length research. So if you're interested in that, or if you want to start that research yourself, let us know, and again, we can try to support that in some way, but only at arm's length. Support meaning help you out so that you know how to use Mobili properly while you're doing your research, that's all.
Excellent, very nice. Another question here that came in, what sort of feedback are you getting from patients who are using this device, and are they seeing improvements in their swallow outcomes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, before I answer, I'm going to say this is anecdotal and it's a lot of patient perception. So if you are a clinician out there or asking this question, just know that we haven't done modified barium swallows and fees to fully and definitively say anything. But clinicians that I've worked, or pardon me, patients that I've worked with have said that they felt they can have different consistencies that they haven't had before. They've been able to have more to eat in a shorter amount of time. So they've reduced their meal time. They've had fewer sips of water. I should preface this, I work with head and neck cancer patients. So that is my patient population is made up of. And the other thing that I hear over and over is that biofeedback, just being able to see what's going on, has helped stick with the exercises. I've had this is like a more recent quote, so it's in my memory, it's fresh in my memory, but I've had 2 gentlemen tell me that now that I've taken their devices back, they just don't think they're gonna stick with their exercises because like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. In that sense, more anecdotally speaking, we have had improvements. We've also run a study that is peer-reviewed and published. It was the last study as part of my PhD in AJSLP, and happy to give that as part of the notes for the recording. But for that particular study, we asked patients to complete the MD Anderson Dysphagia Inventory Questionnaire. And for that one, we have seen improvements in, I think, a little over a quarter of the patients in the study. And those improvements were of 10 points or more, which for that particular tool meant a meaningful clinical difference. So for the clinicians in the audience, I know you know what that means. For patients, it's a little bit of data that gives us a bit more reassurance that what we're seeing is meaningful.
Excellent, thanks. Mary, I'm gonna have you address a couple questions here. We have some about how people obtain the mobility device and how it's purchased. And then of course, there's questions about the cost. And I was wondering if you could just speak to how you might answer those questions.
Sure. So all purchases are made through myself, so you can reach out to me with any questions. But just to give you an idea, mobility core starts at $700, and it includes your mobility sensor, a carrying case, and a charger, and 40 adhesives. And then you can purchase adhesives at any time that you need them. Mobility Plus starts at $1,500. Again, includes one sensor, charging case, cable, 40 adhesives. You can add on additional clinician devices. So if you're a clinician setting this up, let's say if you had 10 clinicians, maybe you want 4 clinician devices, you can do that. Additional devices are $700. Then when we look at Mobility Premium, that starts at $22.95. Again, includes one device and all the accessories and such. And then again, you can purchase additional clinician devices, and then you can purchase devices that you would send home with patients like Gabi was talking about. Additional devices for patients to take home are $500 each. And then for Plus and Premium, there is an annual renewal, and that's to continue access to the clinician portal. Essentially, it's a software renewal. Patients who are looking to use mobility need to do so by connecting with their speech language pathologist. So you can reach out to your speech language pathologist, ask them about mobility. They can always reach out to me. A patient can reach out to me as well. I will always direct you to a clinician, though. We want to be sure that the clinician is determining that swallowing exercises are what they would prescribe for you. And we want to make sure that they're monitoring you if you are going to be exercising at home.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Are there any contraindications for using this device, patients that should not use this?
So the contraindication we have is if there's someone who's allergic to silver. So the sensors are made of silver. So if you have an allergy to silver, you may have a reaction to the sensors. The other one that I include in my research studies is an exclusion criteria, actually, because again, it's kind of a contraindication, is that you don't have any cuts or lesions on the underside of the skin, because that's where the adhesive will go. The adhesive is 3M and it's skin safe. It's just that you don't want anything on there, of course. And then the other contraindications are if there's anything related to the exercises that you're prescribing. So for instance, if I'm ever questioning an intensive workout, I will reach out to the surgeon or the physician and ask. I'll just mention my patient's about to engage in this 6-week program. The workouts are quite intensive. Is there any, or do you have any concerns with them participating in this workout? And typically they don't, but if I ever question it, I do just check in with them.
And just to add on to that, like Gabi mentioned, mobility is applicable, SEMG is applicable to a really wide patient population, but we know that every patient and every situation can be a little bit different. So if you're ever wondering about a particular patient, a particular situation, feel free to get in touch with us, and we're happy to kind of help you work through some of that clinical reasoning if you'd like, to see if this would be a good fit for the particular patient or situation that you're thinking of.
Excellent. We have a family member of a person that has dysphagia following an anoxic brain injury. Wondering if you have any anecdotes or case studies of similar situations and whether they've been able to use the SEMG device.
I personally don't, but it is a dream of mine to be able to connect clinicians out there who are SEMG and mobility users, so that you can answer these questions within that group, and patients and caregivers like this can get those answers there. Very briefly, I'll mention that if your family member is able to sustain attention and look at a screen for 10-15 minutes at a time, then probably yes. And if their speech language pathologist has deemed that they would benefit from exercises like the effortful dysphagia exercise or the Mendelssohn maneuver dysphagia exercise, which are included in this particular app, then again, more reason to try it out. For clinicians out there who are wondering similar things, I always say just try it in the very basic part of the app, the core app, and that app itself is that part of the app itself is really nice, because you can see if your patient reacts to the biofeedback, or if your family member reacts to the biofeedback. And if you see that they kind of get it a little bit more, or they're engaged a little bit more, then that's all the more reason to continue to pursue it. But personally, no, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Another question here from a clinician. Could a patient use this device to try to work on muscle tension dysphagia? And if you can talk a little bit about what muscle tension dysphagia is for some of those in the audience that might not know, would the device be appropriate for that?
Yeah, so I'm going to lean on Renzo here as well if he has some experience with this. Again, I personally don't. It's from what I can glean is that it's dysphagia because of muscles that are too tense. So essentially your goal as a clinician and as a patient is to relax the muscles to allow them to function normally or properly. I personally don't have experience with that again, but yes, you can use that. And I would use the core version of the app because that is more contingent on doing the opposite. So if you're starting up top to get the person to relax their muscles, so essentially get that line to come down in this case. The other part of the app is more constructed to work on exercises that want you to get the line higher up. I'll also mention that the first case of SEMG use in our fields that I was able to find was from 1970s. And it was a case study where someone had worked with this type of dysphagia and SEMG and using SEMG biofeedback to help the patient relax the muscles. So that's the first use of it in our field. I haven't seen it used for that in the literature since then, but yes, definitely that's something it can be used for. Renzo, have you worked with this type of dysphagia at all?
I haven't, but I kind of would agree with what you said, where a lot of what you would be doing is using SEMG as a way to bring awareness to what's going on kind of internally. So I always like to draw the analogy of we've got endoscopy and the barium swallow, the modified barium swallow study to see what's happening internally during the swallow, but we don't often check what's happening during the swallow during treatment. So SEMG is a really nice way to be able to see particular characteristics of what's going on internally, bring that awareness to the forefront when you're doing treatment, and a lot of your treatment kind of is based on that education piece, that awareness piece that you're able to talk about with that shared biofeedback that you can both see.
I've also had I meet with clinicians to help them learn about mobility, and I've had several clinicians comment that they would like to use it for muscle tension dysphagia. So it's happening.
Interesting. Excellent. Thank you, you guys. That's great information. Another question here. We have people joining us from around the globe. Is mobility available in what countries?
Sadly, only in the United States right now.
Okay.
Disappointed to say.
Are there plans, and it's okay if you don't have an answer to this, to expand at some point potentially?
Eventually, but we don't have dates for expansion yet, and wouldn't be the entire globe. It would be one country at a time. So I always say to everybody, connect with us so that I put you on our mailing list and such, so that if anything changes that way, you'll be the first to know. Feel free to send me an email anytime.
Yes. Yeah. Medical device regulations across countries are very complicated. So it's a difficult thing to do, I'm sure. The next question here, because the device is available in the United States, where insurance is a big deal, is the device covered by insurance?
It is not. So one of the things, so if a patient has, we're SIGIS approved, so if a patient has a flex spending account or a health spending account, and they were to purchase their own device for home, then they could expense that, but not in terms of paying for treatment.
Are you finding that clinicians are loaning devices out to patients for a certain length of time and then having them return them?
Yes, yeah, we have some clinics with very large loaner programs, and some of them, I'm always amazed, are even sending it out by mail to people that are rural, so they may have come in for a while. Once a device becomes available, they mail it out to them. They do their exercises for 6 or 8 weeks and mail it back. It's quite wonderful for rural patients, and of course, eliminating all those trips to the clinic.
Yes, yeah, living in Wisconsin, I can relate to not wanting to travel in the winter. Yes. With that, when clinicians are working with patients remotely, are they able to bill for that service? Do you know?
Yes, so if they're a fee-for-service provider, there are therapeutic billing codes that they can use for remote treatment, and I can help anybody with that information as well.
Excellent. And are most clinicians charging patients to rent the device, or is it just part of their treatment program where they're just loaning them out?
Most are just using it as part of the treatment program. I've talked to a few clinicians who are interested in billing, but it's primarily been people in private practice, because setting up that billing is a little bit more difficult in a large institution. Where if people are interested in generating revenue from it, even if you can't necessarily bill for it, where you will see a difference is if you can see more patients because you are loaning devices out, you're going to generate more revenue. So if a patient sees you, let's say twice a week for a month, so that's 8 appointments normally in your schedule. If now you see them to assess them, teach them how to use mobility, send them home with a device, you've now freed up 6 appointments in your schedule to see more patients. So you shorten your wait lists and generate more revenue.
Excellent. Thanks, Mary. A clinical question here for you guys. How was the decision made when designing the device for the distance between the electrodes?
Wow, that's such a specific question. Must be an SEMG clinician out there. Those decisions are documented in one of our articles, I think one of our first articles, but they are based on the CENIUM guidelines, and the electrode diameter, or sensor diameter, as well as the inter-sensor distance are based on CENIUM guidelines. And for those of you who don't know, these are guidelines, engineering type guidelines that dictate how big these sensors should be and what the distance between them should be based on the muscles of interest. So I remember looking at many articles trying to figure out the size of the anterior belly of the digastric so that we could create or manufacture these sensors based on the muscles of interest. It's also why it might be a little problematic at times to borrow SEMG sensors and devices from our physiotherapist partners because they're looking at bigger muscles. So trying to borrow a sensor device that's meant for biceps, not mine, because mine are probably as big as the anterior belly of the digastric. It might be tricky to use those in the submental area because the quality of the signal won't be as good. Great question.
That's a complex question. I have another question here, going back to your demonstration that you did, Gabi. The person asking had a hard time telling the difference between the tongue press and a regular swallow. What's the best way to know what's going on if you're not seeing the person do it or instructing the person to do those exercises? How can you tell?
Great question. Yeah. So for the core type of version of the app that I demonstrated, you would be sitting next to the patient to do that with them. So it would be very much like the technology that I was using and that Renzo was using back in the clinic, where we just had this streaming biofeedback line and we pause it, check in with the patient. Was that the swallow, that type of activity? If you also need to be able to trust that patients are doing what you've asked them to do. But if it's more of an educational piece, again, that's where your clinical observations and judgments would come in. Did you see thyroid movement? Do you think a swallow happened? Pause the streaming of the biofeedback and check in again. With the exercise piece of the app, we do have a swallow detection algorithm that's built into it. And this, again, is a work in progress. These things can always be improved. Can you trick it? Yes. At times you can trick it for sure. So again, we're relying on patients attempting at least to be honest and complete the exercises as indicated. We are always working on improving that swallow detection algorithm in the back end. If you'd like to learn more about some of the published parts of it, let me know. And I have an article that was published, I believe in dysphagia. I could be wrong now, I can't remember. But it's us evaluating a swallow detection algorithm based on SEMG data coming in. So what we did is we trained the algorithm using non-swallow trials or repetitions and swallow repetitions, and then we evaluated it.
Thank you. I think we've made it through most of the questions. I apologize if I missed your question. If we didn't get to it, please feel free to reach out to us, reach out to Gabi and her team. But we'll pause here for this evening. I want to thank all three of you for joining us and sharing more about the Mobili and SEMG. I think this was really helpful to everybody that joined our call, whether you're a clinician, a caregiver, a person with difficulty swallowing. I hope you got something out of this presentation. There are 2 handouts available to download on your toolbar, and I'll also email those out to everybody. And with that, Gabi, thank you for the work that you've done to create this. There's a lot that goes into it. The research behind this with your PhD, it's absolutely fantastic. So the work that you and your team are doing, keep up the great work. There were several comments tonight thanking you for your innovations, and I'll send you all of those comments. With that, I'd like to remind everybody that our next Meet the Makers is on April 27th, featuring Tim's Medical. They produce a technology that helps look at and interpret instrumental swallowing evaluation. So please join us for that. It's free. We'll send out more information, and registration for that will open tomorrow. We also are doing what's called our TED Talks, talking about dysphagia, kind of a play on TED Talks. And our next one will be on April 6th. And that one will be on the basics of exercises, so swallowing exercise physiology, featuring Heather Starmer. So we welcome you to join us for that if you're interested. And with that, we'll close out tonight. I will be sending everybody a brief survey by tomorrow morning. If you could complete that, it gives us some really helpful information, and we appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Gabi, Mary, and Renzo, thank you so much for your time tonight. An excellent presentation. And we hope to see you again soon. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.